Audrii Cunningham was 8 years old when she disappeared on what should have been a normal school morning, but she never made it to the bus. Within hours, concern turned into a search, and by the end of the day, investigators were already focused on someone close to her, someone who had been in a position of trust. Audrii was expected to go to school like any other day, but she did not arrive. When attendance was taken, she was marked absent. Trying to account for her whereabouts, a simple explanation was expected. Maybe she missed the bus, a change in routine, or a simple miscommunication. But there was no confirmed sighting of her at the bus stop and no clear explanation from anyone who could account for that morning. As those checks came up empty, the situation changed quickly. What began as a routine absence became a missing child investigation. Welcome to Behind the Yellow Tape. I'm Mimi, and here we share some of the most spine-chilling, gut-stirring, mysterious crime stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. So if mystery and crime is your cup of tea, then you'll definitely get your fill here. We upload every Wednesday at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you love a midweek dose of suspense, whether from your favorite seat, the car, before bed, or during your favorite activity, then leave a like to help build the algorithm. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Now, let's take a step behind the yellow tape. What began as a routine absence protocol became a missing child investigation. Once it was clear Audrii could not be located, attention shifted immediately to establishing her last known movements. Investigators and family members worked backwards through the morning. When she was last believed to be at home, whether she reached the bus route, and who had seen her most recently. One person quickly became central to that timeline. Don Stephen McDougall had been around her that morning and was believed to have been involved in her transportation or supervision to the bus stop. That made him one of the last confirmed individuals with potential access to her. Law enforcement responded rapidly once the missing child report escalated. Search operations focused on the surrounding environment, rural roads and nearby highways, wooded areas, waterways, and drainage zones. The terrain around the area made the search difficult. Large portions of land were isolated, which limited visibility in long stretches of undeveloped spaces. Search teams included law enforcement units and community volunteers, all working against time, because in cases involving missing children, time is the most critical factor. As the search continued, investigators worked to reconstruct a precise timeline of the morning. They focused on 3 key questions. Where was Audrii last confirmed to be? Who had contact with her that morning? And what could not be yet verified? This is where the investigation began to narrow. Certain details were confirmed, but gaps remained, particularly around the period between her expected departure for school and the moment she was reported missing. Those gaps became the focus of the investigation. When investigators spoke with Don Stephen McDougall, he provided an account of the morning's events. But as his statement was reviewed and compared with other information, inconsistencies appeared. Some details did not align with known timelines, and other parts could not be independently verified. And as questioning continued, the account did not become clearer, it became more uncertain. In missing child investigations, that pattern is significant. It often indicates that the key information is missing or being withheld. At this point, McDougall became a primary focus of the investigation. As inconsistencies accumulated, the case shifted from a missing child investigation to a potential criminal case. Search efforts became more targeted. Instead of broad land searches, investigators began focusing on specific locations connected to McDougall's movements and access. The goal was no longer just finding Audrii, it was determining what happened to her. Authorities moved forward based on the evidence and investigative findings. Don Stephen McDougall was taken into custody. This marked a major turning point in the case. At that stage, investigators were no longer working with uncertainty about involvement. The focus shifted to locating Audrii and confirming the full sequence of events. But one critical question remained unanswered. Where was she? Even after the arrest, search efforts continued. Investigators expanded their focus to areas McDougall had access to and locations that matched gaps in the timeline. Waterways became a particular point of interest, as they often are in searches where evidence may have been concealed or moved. Specialized search teams use coordinated methods to examine difficult terrain and water systems thoroughly. Despite extensive efforts, there was still no immediate resolution. Eventually, the search reached a tragic conclusion. Audrii Cunningham was found deceased. The discovery confirmed the worst outcome of the investigation. At that point, the case transitioned from a missing persons investigation to a homicide investigation. The focus shifted entirely to evidence, accountability, and establishing a complete legal narrative of what occurred. Based on the totality of evidence, investigators determined that Audrii's disappearance was not accidental. She had been in the presence of someone who had access to her and was expected to ensure her safety. Instead, that trust was violated. While not every detail of the case has been made public, investigators established that her death resulted from intentional actions rather than an accident or misunderstanding. This case deeply affected the local community. In smaller areas, incidents like this feel immediate and personal. People often know the families involved or recognize the location tied to the investigation. As news spread, there was a shared sense of shock and grief. Community members participated in searches, followed updates closely, and tried to make sense of how something like this could happen in a familiar environment. One of the most difficult aspects of this case is that it does not follow the pattern people often expect. There was no unknown stranger, and there was no random encounter. Instead, the person connected to the investigation was someone familiar, someone who had access and proximity. That reality changes how these cases are understood, and it shows that the risk is not always external. Sometimes it exists within trusted environments. Following the discovery and arrest, the case entered the legal system. Prosecutors began building their case using physical and forensic evidence, investigative timelines, witness statements, and inconsistencies in accounts. These cases move slowly by necessity. Each stage must be supported by verified evidence to ensure accuracy in court. The legal processes continue to determine accountability based on their evidence. Beyond the investigation and legal proceedings, the central truth of this case remains unchanged. Audrii Cunningham was a child with a normal routine and a future ahead of her. That future was taken from her in a moment that disrupted everything that should have been ordinary. What remains is not just a case file or investigation, but the loss of a life that should have continued forward. Audrii was supposed to get on the bus that morning, but she didn't. And what followed was a rapid unfolding of events that transformed a routine day into a criminal investigation. And in the end, one truth remained clear. A normal morning was interrupted, and nothing after it was the same. If you listened all the way through, I appreciate you being here. And as always, make sure you tune in every Wednesday at 6:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm Mimi, and this has been A Step Behind the Yellow Tape.